Hi and welcome everyone. Today we're going to discuss Medusa. You're probably familiar with this snake-like goddess, and I'm excited to share my knowledge about her with you. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself for those who are unfamiliar with me. My name is Miss Scarlett Black and I'm a practicing witch. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in philosophy and religion with a specialty in philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness. I also have a bunch of certificates, including ones in helping skills, archetypal psychology, and depth psychology. Discussing mythology is one of my favorite things to do. I have 9 goddesses I'm especially drawn to, and I have expertise in the 7 deadly sins. I'm also a Raven mom to Nevermore. You can follow that adventure on Instagram at ravensregale if you so desire. I have an eclectic belief system and want you to know that this is a safe place for all beliefs. I welcome pagans, Christians, Satanists, indigenous, and anyone open to exploration to the table. So if you're open-minded and willing to explore any and all beliefs, then welcome. Now that you know a little about me, I'd like to know a little about you. Please join our Discord server and tell us about yourself and your thoughts on today's lecture. It's always fun to discuss these ideas further. So we're about to make our way to meet Medusa, but before we do, I want you to think of one word you associate with her. I'd like to see if that word stays the same after the lecture. And please share with us your word on the Discord server. My word is protector. So thank you again for joining on this day to celebrate Medusa. In my personal spiritual practice, the 24th of the month is always a day for me to celebrate an archetypal figure. July 24th is Medusa's day, and I hope to help you understand her a bit more. So let's begin. Different myths tell differing stories of how Medusa came to be. In Hesiod's Theogony from 700 BCE, she is depicted as a member of a family of sea monsters. She is the daughter of Keto, which translates to mighty, and of Phorkys, god of the dangerous seas. As you can see here, her father, Phorkys, was a merman. He has a fish tail, crab legs, and red skin. Her mother was portrayed in various ways as a giant sea monster or a whale. And Medusa is the granddaughter of Gaia, which is land, and Pontus, which is the sea. Medusa is one of triplet gorgons, which, according to Hesiod, were the dangerous rocks in the sea that boats could hit and thus sink. Her sister Steno was the oldest, and her name translates to forceful. She was independent, ferocious, and killed more men than both her sisters combined. Uriel was the second-born Gorgon. Her name translates to far-roaming. She was known for her loud cries, and according to the poet Pindar in 500 BCE, he said, quote, "Her anguished howls made stone crumble to sand." Medusa was the youngest and possibly the only mortal of the 3 Gorgons. Her name translates to guardian. The 3 sisters have at least 5 siblings. Ladon, a dragon, who may also represent the strong rip currents. Thusa, which is swift currents, and another set of triplets, the gray. Those triplets represented sea foam and were born as old hags. They are Pumphedro, which translates to alarm, Evoio, horror, and Dino, dread. And they are all the cousins of the Harpies, which are the dangerous whirlwinds. Medusa and Poseidon had 2 sons. Pegasus, whose name means strong, he was a winged horse. His myth evolves to say that he's the carrier of Zeus's lightning bolts. You can see here a modern day depiction with the lightning bolts, and then a depiction from a vase from 510 BCE. He had a brother named Chrysaor, which his name translates to golden blade, and he was a winged boar. By Chrysaor, Medusa is grandmother to Echnida, Geryon, and great-grandmother to Orthos, Kerberos, Hydra, and Chimera. So I just want to take a moment here to say a brief note about Hecate. As you saw noted on the family tree, Hecate's grandmother is Medusa's aunt. But also, Keto and Medusa are both epithets for Hecate. Hecate is known to have triplet forms, possibly a connection with the triple goddess, like the triplet Gorgons. And Hecate is frequently shown with serpents, like you see in this image on the left. Hecate is also guardian of Kerberos, who is Medusa's great-grandson. So there's a definite, albeit mysterious, Hecate-Medusa connection. So we're talking about Greece. The exact location of where Medusa is from is disputed. The green pentagons on the map are the three possible locations. There's Sarpedon or Kysthene, which is the little island. There's possibly Libya or somewhere along the Red Sea. The Gorgons sisters lived in a cave along water. So I think the Red Sea makes a lot of sense if we believe the Perseus myth. But Sarpedon makes more sense if we believe Hesioid's origin as being the dangerous rocks. The pentagon in Libya indicates the location of a recently found ancient cave at Al-Marj, and it's next to Cyrene, where a Hecate temple was found. I don't yet know what was found in the cave, but I'd be curious to find that out. The green triangles are shrines or temples that have Medusa's image in them, and you can see they cover a vast amount of area. So hopefully you know the main stories of Medusa, and so this is just going to be an overview. But as stated, there are multiple versions of the stories. As we've seen in Theogony, there is little violence. Her genealogy is laid out, and she's of a supernatural family. Also in Theogony, Medusa took a lover, Poseidon, the god of the sea. They mated in a field of beautiful flowers, and they produced Pegasus and Chrysaor. I think this makes a lot of sense. If Medusa is from a family of sea creatures, she would naturally mate with a sea god. But 708 years after Theogony, Ovid wrote Metamorphosis, which states that Medusa did not lay with Poseidon willingly, that he raped her in Athena's temple. Her genealogy is also completely different. The story states that Medusa was a great beauty and served Athena in her temple as a priestess. Since Athena was a virgin goddess, all her priestesses were too. When Medusa was raped, she could no longer serve the goddess, and Athena was angry and turned Medusa into a horrible monster, and Medusa was vanquished. That begs the question of what the other two Gorgons did to receive the same fate, or maybe possibly Medusa was the only mortal Gorgon, but it still leaves many questions left unanswered. So Metamorphosis is the most well-known version, and in that, Perseus was the son of a mortal princess, Danae, and god Zeus, making him a demigod. Athena was the daughter of Zeus, making her and Perseus half-siblings. So Perseus went out seeking the Gorgon's head in a big hero's quest. He was helped by Hermes, the messenger of the gods, and given winged sandals so he could travel large distances quickly, and by Athena was given a shield. Perseus finds the Gorgon cave, cuts Medusa's head off, and becomes the hero for doing so. And a third story Apollodorus in the library does not mention Medusa being raped, but rather she was turned into a monster by Athena because she rivaled the goddess's beauty. Athena did not like to be challenged, and you might know that from other stories she transferred other women like Arachne. So the library is the first place we see the description of the Gorgons as having snakes on their heads, large boar-like tusks, hands of bronze, and wings of gold, and the ability to turn those who looked at them to stone. You can see I have that part bolded in this current slide. He also describes how Pegasus and Chrysaor were birthed from Medusa's neck when her head was cut off. So the story gets more violent as we move through time. With the progression of the stories, we can see the societal changes. One reason for Poseidon overtaking Medusa in Athena's temple comes from the story of the naming of Athens. Athena and Poseidon battled over the city of King Cecrops. Athena won, and thus the city was named Athens after her. So it's possible that Poseidon sought revenge on Athena by raping her beloved priestess in her temple. An important fact to note, though, is that between the stories of Theogony and Metamorphosis, virtue ethics was formed. So during 470 to 322 BCE, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were forming virtue ethics, and they believed in the four cardinal virtues: justice, temperance, fortitude, and wisdom. They taught that the logical side of humans should rule over desires and emotions. This self-control was necessary to have a functioning society and republic. Thus, we can see that Athena, or wisdom, cuts the head off of desire and emotion. Because if we follow that Poseidon is god of the sea, sea is related to water, and water is related to emotions. So Medusa, priestess of Athena, the unemotional virgin goddess, was raped or overtaken by Poseidon, or emotion, and wisdom has to do with this through Perseus, the masculine hero, which is also the symbol of patriarchy. So Athena is a goddess of wisdom. She's a virgin goddess, born out of Zeus's head. Thus, she did not have a mother. She was completely abandoned any form of matriarchy in favor of patriarchy. And yet, another explanation is that a woman's beauty holds power. So a very beautiful woman in a place of power, like a priestess, would be dangerous. So it was taught that women were property and a man had to be in charge of her. So in order for the patriarchy to flourish, men had to subdue women, which we can take from Medusa's story. And I believe that these are the explanations of why the story changes. But that's not the end all of Medusa's origins. So the Gorgonian is the face of the Gorgon used artistically on various items such as vases, shields, and buildings. This type of face is not only found in Greece, but all over the world. They're generally thought to be apotropaic devices used to turn away evil. And here are some examples. We have Kurtamukha, who is the Indian god of vengeance. From the 7th century CE is this example. And Tonatiuh, the Aztec 5th sun god. We're currently in the 5th sun, according to that belief system. The Iroquois had their flying heads, which are cannibalistic spirits. And we have the Malagan masks from New Zealand and New Ireland. They're a Gorgon-type mask associated with death, and the ancestors, which people actually wore at the funerals. And we have one of my favorite guys, Tao Te, the Chinese guardian of food. He's also called the glutton. And of course, we have Kali, the Hindu goddess, who we start hearing about in about 200 BCE. She's definitely associated with Medusa. If you study Medusa enough, you're going to run into Kali. They're definitely associated, but they're not conflated. But yeah, you can see that these pictures are very similar to the Gorgon's head that we find. In Greek literature, Medusa is conflated with several deities, and one of those includes Phobos, the god of fear, as shown here in this Roman mosaic. He has a twin brother named Deimos, which represents dread and terror, much like Medusa's sister. So you can see this mosaic, it does look very similar to a Gorgon's face, the way this is put in. Medusa is also conflated with her sisters, the Gray, the Arienes, or another name for those are the Furies. They punished guilt. Her cousin, the Harpies, which are half birds who carried the guilty to the Furies to be punished, and the Moirae, or the Fates. Outside of Greece, Medusa is conflated with the Egyptian god Bes, who is the protector of households. In Mesopotamia, Humbaba is a similar monster we find in the story of Gilgamesh. It's told that, quote, when he looks at someone, it is the look of death, end quote. He guards the area where the guards lived and was murdered by Gilgamesh. And also in Mesopotamia, we see Pazuzu with similarities as he is the protector of pregnancy and mothers. And as you may notice, almost all of these are associated in one way or another with death. Stephen Wilk believes that the Greek Gorgon mask is the face of death. When a body dies and is not preserved, it becomes bloated, forcing the tongue out of the mouth. The eyes bulge out, and the skin may pull back to expose the teeth, and the hair becomes very stringy. I don't think Wilk's explanation is the only explanation. However, I don't believe he's necessarily wrong, which leads us to Medusa as death. In Dante's Inferno from 1310 CE, Medusa is a guardian of the city of Dis, which is circles 6 to 9 of hell. She stands outside the gates with the Arienes, or the Furies. And this is a quote from the story. Turn round and keep your eyes shut fast, for should the Gorgon show herself and you behold her, never again would you return above. That's what Virgil warns Dante with. So even in the underworld, if one gazes upon Medusa's eyes, one perishes. Even severed from her body, her head holds the power to turn someone to stone. Her blood was said to poison and to cure. Vials of her blood were given to Asclepius, the god of medicine. So her death gives life. Remember also that caves are entrance points into the underworld, and the three Gorgon sisters live in a cave. Gorgon is an underworld demon associated with the mouths or the hot springs of the underworld. Thus, the Gorgon has come to be associated with fear, like Phobos, the fear of death, the seas, animals, volcanic eruptions, the unknown, darkness, and emptiness. So, Medusa is the void that stares back at you. The paralyzing fear of the unknown, the darkness, the emptiness. I find it telling that images of her are found at Eleusis. This is the black triangle that you saw on the map. Eleusis is the place that the Eleusinian Mysteries took place every year. One vase from 625 BCE was found at Eleusis where the Gorgons are chasing Perseus. There are also places like a temple in Sparta where face masks in the shape of the Gorgon have been found. So this could symbolize keeping people outside of the sacred temple, as well as the changes that happen inside the temple. Eleusis was a mystery cult where they celebrated death and regeneration. Followers gathered at this spot every year for 3 days. It's believed the initiates took a hallucinogen and had an ego death and then rebirth. Persephone, Demeter, and Hecate all oversaw these rites. Hecate was a psychopomp leading Demeter through the underworld. So this may be where her epithet, a Medusa, comes from. Which brings us to snakes. Snakes mean regeneration in many myths around the world. Snakes themselves are regenerative. They represent change as they shed their old skins. So Medusa represents change as she is crowned by snakes. Snakes are common, very, very common symbols in mythology. Even in the Christian story of Adam and Eve, the snake brought about transformation. So staring into the snakes may be scary and may cause a death, but most importantly, they may cause you to transform yourself, for renewal cannot come without death. Kundalini is the rise of consciousness through the chakras. It begins at the base of the spine and works its way up through the crown chakra. It's often thought of as a serpent coiling at the base of the spine, waiting to be released. And once it is, it surges up through all the chakras. After Medusa was initiated in the temple by Poseidon, her Kundalini was awakened, and thus snakes came out of her head as a signal of her initiation. She thus initiates others by turning them to stone. Her powers of initiation are hinted at in the Suda. The Suda is an ancient Byzantine encyclopedia. Under the Medusa entry, it is said, quote, "The head Perseus called Gorgon because of its sheer force. He taught the terrible initiation connection with the Gorgon to some of the Persians, whom he called Magi." So the Gorgon initiates you into the magic. So to stare into the face of Medusa, one would be able to die and then be reborn in a new way. So I want to share with you my personal story of the first time I met Medusa. When I was a teenager, my home life was rough. My father was physically and mentally abusive. One summer day, my father marched upstairs to my room, threw my large CD changer stereo onto the floor, ripped the cord out of the wall, and threatened that if I ever turned it on again, he would kill me. When he barged into my room, I was standing at my mirror, brushing my hair. When he left, I was on the floor cowering on my knees, terrified. When I realized he had left, I opened my eyes and saw my hairbrush in my hand was wet with all my tears. I honestly thought he was going to kill me that day. To this day, I still do not know what caused his outbursts, but I survived. And then I saw a lizard woman, that's what I called her at the time, on the balcony of the house. I lived in a 2-story house, and we had one of those balconies that looks down into the living room. This lizard woman used to pace around that balcony. Her bottom half was that of a snake, and her top half was that of a fierce warrior woman. She did not have snakes in her hair. I never was afraid of her, but I knew not to bother her, that I should just leave her be. She remained on that balcony, just pacing around, keeping guard. My father never came upstairs again. I never told anyone then what I saw, and I never understood who it was until many years later. I now know that Medusa has been my protector through my life. It is not coincidence that she showed up at the time I began menstruating and was being abused. So this is how I know that Medusa guards women's mysteries and is a protector. In modern day, Medusa's image is being reclaimed as a source of power. Many of us who have felt marginalized are growing restless with these restraints. Her face is now the image of justifiable or sacred rage. It's quite possible she's represented this from the beginning. Learning to tap into the incredible power to turn someone to stone, to stop them in their tracks, will take time. But know that she is just boiling under the surface. This is the power of transformation, or in Ovid's word, metamorphosis. To take the trauma and find the power within. In this reclamation, this is also why I celebrate Medusa on the 24th. The Neptunalia was celebrated on July 23rd in ancient Rome. Neptune is the Roman god conflated with the Greek god Poseidon. In one of my recent workings with Medusa, I had a vision. I was standing in front of Hecate, and she was very calm, holding space for what was about to occur. Then Medusa claws her way out of my uterus and stands in front of me with a spear ready to fight. So I know that I have the power deep within my womanhood. Which I am sure Sigmund Freud would have a field day with this vision. He believed that Medusa was a symbol for the castrating mother that the boy had to overcome in order to grow into manhood. For him, the Gorgon head is a symbol of castration, the snakes are the pubic hairs, and it all represents sexual potency. Richard Payne Knight, an English scholar from 1750 to 1824 CE, believed that Medusa's head signified destruction and reproduction, the female generative power, and the menstrual cycles. And Jean Clair, a French art historian from 1940 to present day, describes Medusa as the opposite, or the mirror image, or the shadow figure of the goddess Baubo. As you can see here, she was pretty much a walking, talking vulva, and she just cracked jokes all the time. Arthur Miller, the American playwright, 1915 to 2005 CE, believed that the Medusa story showed the competition between women, between goddess and mortal, mirroring the mother-daughter conflict. So, what about the mirror? Mirrors have a long mythology themselves. They're used for magic rituals and divination. They're seen as portals to other worlds, like in Alice in Wonderland. And vampires have no reflections in mirrors in many of the myths. Perseus was only able to slay Medusa by looking into her reflection in his shield. In psychology, we speak of projection, which is when one denies the existence of certain traits within their being, but they attribute those denied traits to others. If the ego refuses to accept the trait, it's split off from the self and seen in another in an exaggerated way. And Carl Jung, of course, stated that the shadow was prone to projection. And in twin flame theory, it's taught that your twin flame is your mirror soul. They show you what you avoid within yourself, and in order to heal, you must clearly see what is in the mirror. So this leaves many questions and theories. And I would love to hear your thoughts. And to help you get thinking, I have some questions for you to reflect on. Is the word you began with still the word you hold true to Medusa? Where do you feel Medusa in your body? Did Athena protect Medusa from harm by changing her appearance? Or was she identifying with the patriarchal society by blaming the victim? Perseus has to look into a mirror to see and kill Medusa. What does the mirror tell us? Why would the reflection not turn him to stone? Was Medusa a shadow aspect, the exaggerated anger felt by Athena, but Athena could not express it, thus she creates a monster to harbor her anger? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Be sure to post them on Discord. Thanks so much for joining, and I hope Medusa brings a lot to your life.